Hey, welcome back. Glad to have you here. Today's briefing is one of the most significant we've covered in a long time. Over the past 48 hours, Russia launched a massive three-wave strike campaign against Ukraine, deploying over 1,000 aerial targets in total, a scale specifically designed to overwhelm and exhaust Ukrainian air defenses before delivering the decisive blow. Kiev took the hardest hits, but the strikes reached far beyond the capital. At the same time, on the ground, the situation is shifting on multiple axes simultaneously: Sumy, Kharkiv, Lyman, Zaparisia, with each direction carrying its own strategic logic. And in the Middle East, the United States has moved from military positioning to active economic warfare, initiating a naval blockade in the Arabian Sea with consequences that extend well beyond Iran. There's a lot to get through today, so let's get straight into it. Between the late evening of April 14th and the morning of April 16th, 2026, Russia launched an unprecedented combined strike on Ukrainian territory, executed in 3 successive waves. In terms of sheer volume of aerial assets employed, the operation represents one of the largest single strike packages documented since the beginning of the full-scale war. The sequencing of the waves, each timed to exploit the degradation caused by the previous one, points to a deliberate, carefully coordinated campaign designed to systematically overwhelm Ukrainian air defense rather than saturate it with a single concentrated salvo. The first wave began late on the evening of April 14th and concluded in the early hours of April 15th. According to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, reporting at around 8 a.m. on April 15th, the strike involved a total of 327 aerial targets, drones and missiles combined, including at least 4 Iskander ballistic missiles. In retrospect, this wave served as much a preparatory function as an independent operation, its primary strategic purpose being to begin depleting Ukrainian interceptor stocks ahead of the larger strikes to follow. The second wave followed with virtually no pause, running approximately from 7 a.m. to 8:10 p.m. on April 15th. Its defining feature was the mass employment of Kh-101 cruise missiles, long-range weapons capable of flying complex terrain-hugging flight profiles that complicate interception. According to monitoring sources and available mapping data, the Kh-101s entered Ukrainian airspace from the direction of Kherson and Dnipropetrovsk oblasts, tracking northwest toward Kyiv. Ukrainian air defense systems engaged the missiles continuously along the entire route, and the majority were intercepted over Kyiv and the Kyiv region. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense reported a total of 382 aerial targets in this wave, including more than 20 Kh-101 cruise missiles. The deliberate use of cruise missiles in the second wave, rather than the first, suggests calculated sequencing. By leading with drones and ballistic missiles, Russian planners likely sought to force Ukrainian air defense networks to activate and draw down resources before committing the more expensive cruise missile arsenal. Ukraine's integrated air defense was developed in close coordination with European partners and NATO member states, which reportedly maintained stocks of interceptor missiles in Poland and several other allied countries, transferring them to Ukraine only upon confirmed intelligence of an imminent large-scale strike. According to various expert assessments, the system is designed to absorb no more than 800-900 aerial targets within a single 24-hour operational period before its capacity to mount effective resistance begins to degrade critically. After 2 consecutive waves, the cumulative number of Russian aerial objects employed had approached 700. By the end of April 15th, Ukraine's air defense on the Kiev axis had been significantly depleted. Interceptor magazines run down, radar crews fatigued, and command networks under sustained pressure, creating precisely the conditions Russian planners had engineered for the decisive third strike. The third wave came overnight on April 16th. Russia again directed hundreds of drones toward Kyiv, this time accompanied by dozens of Iskander ballistic missiles. Unlike cruise missiles, ballistic missiles descend at extremely high velocities along a steep arc, dramatically reducing the engagement window available to defenders. Against a degraded air defense, the Iskanders met minimal effective resistance. The consequences were documented in real time. Thick columns of black smoke rose over multiple districts of the capital as emergency services mobilized across the city. Expert analysis identified the targets as automobile dealerships and commercial facilities involved in vehicle sales and transit, indicating that Russian targeting on this occasion extended to commercial logistics infrastructure beyond purely military or energy objectives. Beyond Kyiv, strikes were recorded in Bila Tserkva, where a combined heat and power plant was targeted, and in Cherkasy, where the local power station came under attack, continuing the pattern of sustained pressure on Ukraine's energy generation network. Significant strikes also hit Odessa, a critical logistics hub linking Ukraine to international supply chains, and widespread damage was documented across Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. The Ukrainian military's consolidated report for the period from 7 a.m. on April 15th through the morning of April 16th recorded 703 aerial targets across the second and third waves. The cumulative total for the entire two-day period stood at 1,030 aerial targets, substantially exceeding the estimated absorption capacity of Ukraine's air defense and confirming that the three-wave structure was specifically engineered to breach that threshold. Ukraine's retaliatory strike on Russian territory. In the early hours of April 16th, Ukraine launched a retaliatory strike against targets inside Russia, employing an estimated 270 drones. The operation demonstrates Ukraine's continued capability to carry the war onto Russian soil, forcing Moscow to allocate air defense assets to the protection of its own territory. The most significant damage was inflicted in the Tuapse area on Russia's Black Sea coast, where a major fire broke out at an oil refinery, a facility of considerable operational significance given the broader context of sanctions already constraining Russian energy revenues. Local residents published footage showing a heavy black smoke plume visible from considerable distance, corroborated within hours by satellite imagery. The rapid availability of those images indicates that continuous orbital surveillance was being conducted over the Tuapse area, with results promptly relayed to relevant parties, a clear indicator of the real-time ISR support Ukraine continues to receive from its partners. Sumy direction. Russian forces continue offensive operations on the Sumy axis, where the tactical situation is evolving at a notably faster pace than on most other front sections. Advances have been recorded in the area of Taratutyne, north of Ryazna and south of Novodmitrivka, as Russian units press toward Krasnopilya from multiple directions along a front exceeding 50 kilometers in width. Progress has also been noted near Stepok, with pro-Ukrainian sources reporting that a significant portion of the settlement has passed under Russian control. The tactics employed here differ markedly from those observed elsewhere. Particularly noteworthy is the use of drones to drop informational leaflets over Sumy itself. And crucially, the content of these leaflets is directed not at Ukrainian military personnel, but at the civilian population. Rather than calling for surrender or position abandonment, the messaging appears designed to reassure residents and position the approaching Russian forces as arriving in an organized, deliberate manner. This strongly suggests that Russian command is pursuing an explicit objective of capturing Sumy as an intact, functioning city, a marked contrast to the trajectories of Toretsk, Bakhmut and Pokrovsk, all of which suffered severe destruction through prolonged urban combat. The investment in civilian-oriented information operations at this stage points to a longer-term administrative and political plan for the city. Kharkiv direction. Russian forces have improved their positions in the northeastern part of Kharkiv Oblast. Pro-Russian sources report that Russian units have entered the settlement of Zemlyanka. The primary operational focus of the northern grouping on this axis remains the consolidation of a bridgehead along the right bank of the Vovcha River, systematically widening the zone of control to create a defensible forward position from which further offensive action can be developed. Lyman direction. Ukrainian forces have launched a counter-offensive on the Lyman axis, not aimed at advancing toward Rubizn or Kremina, but designed as a spoiling operation to improve tactical positions ahead of the assessed final phase of the battle for Lyman. The VSU is counterattacking along two vectors, from the north along tree lines towards Zarychny and from the eastern part of Lyman through its southeastern outskirts. The tactical aim is the encirclement of Russian units operating east and northeast of the city along its urban periphery. The approach closely mirrors Ukrainian tactics on the western Zaparisia axis, where proactive counterattacks ahead of a major Russian offensive, succeeded in slowing the subsequent rate of advance, even if they could not prevent it entirely. The Antonivka axis. No significant changes to the front line configuration. Video footage from the central part of the city confirms the ongoing presence of Russian units within the industrial zone, while additional footage documents strikes against VSU positions to the west. The situation here remains attritional, with Russian forces consolidating within captured portions of the urban area, rather than pushing aggressively for new territorial gains at this time. Doilia direction. Pro-Ukrainian sources are effectively acknowledging the imminent loss of Hryshine. Following its capture, Russian forces are expected to expand the buffer zone along the perimeter and advance gradually into open terrain from the direction of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, with the next logical vector pointing toward Doilia. Direct fighting within Doilia itself remains a future scenario, but one that analysts assess as strategically inevitable on current trajectories. Zaparisia direction. Russian forces continue intensive reconnaissance activity consistent with ongoing offensive preparations, though the active phase of ground movement has not yet materialized. On the western Zaparisia axis, a new wave of Ukrainian counter-offensive activity has been noted around Stepnohirsk, with several sources reporting that Ukrainian units have entered the settlement's northeastern outskirts and that fighting is already taking place within its boundaries. This information has not yet been independently verified and requires further confirmation. Middle East. Strait of Hormuz. Economic blockade. The United States has completed its naval force deployment in the Arabian Sea and commenced what U.S. officials are describing as an economic blockade, termed an economic offensive by the Secretary of Defense. American naval forces are blocking passage through the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf of Oman for any vessels associated with Iranian ports, compelling them to turn back. The confrontation currently remains in a non-kinetic phase, with no shots fired. Washington's strategy rests on three interlocking pillars: the physical interdiction of Iranian oil exports via naval blockade, secondary sanctions targeting any third-party financial institutions or governments facilitating Iranian transactions, and the broader isolation of Tehran from international capital markets. The U.S. Treasury Secretary made the secondary sanctions dimension explicit. Foreign banks and governments holding Iranian assets were placed on public notice. This message is directed with particular force at China, Iran's principal oil consumer, which has benefited substantially from the steep discount at which sanctioned Iranian crude trades internationally. By severing Beijing's access to that discounted supply, Washington aims to eliminate a structural competitive advantage, effectively using the Iranian pressure campaign as an instrument of broader great power rivalry. Analysts broadly assess that if the blockade is sustained, the current cold phase is unlikely to remain stable indefinitely, and the probability of escalation toward a kinetic confrontation is significant over the medium term. Israel-Lebanon. Official-level negotiations between Israel and Lebanon have resumed without the participation of Hezbollah, a deliberate Israeli condition reflecting Tel Aviv's refusal to treat the organization as a legitimate diplomatic interlocutor. Reports indicate that the Lebanese president initially declined direct engagement with the Israeli side, reflecting deep domestic political sensitivities. Nevertheless, the diplomatic channel remains open through third-party intermediaries. Simultaneously, Israel has continued its ground operation in southern Lebanon, without any reduction in tempo, methodically advancing to establish a defined buffer zone along the border. Israeli defense forces have consolidated firm control over the Bint Jbeil area, a town that previously served as a significant Hezbollah base of operations, and several adjacent settlements are either already encircled or in the process of being enveloped. A temporary reduction in fighting intensity appears plausible given the parallel diplomatic process, but available assessments suggest this would reflect a deliberate Israeli decision to consolidate and fortify on already controlled ground, rather than any revision of strategic objectives. A resumption of active hostilities is assessed as probable within the coming weeks, regardless of the outcome of current diplomatic contacts.